Due diligence and representations and warranties in a definitive agreement play two separate and distinct roles. First, due diligence tells you everything you would want to know about your potential target. And the second, representations and warranties, are a backup for that due diligence. So everything you learn in due diligence is going to be represented and warranted in the definitive agreement to tell you that everything in due diligence is true, accurate, correct, and to an absolute bottom line. It will also tell you as an acquirer that there is nothing about this bank that you don't know. So the due diligence tells you what you actually want to learn, and the representations and warranties tell you that what you've learned is true and correct, and there's nothing else to know about your target. In the due diligence process, acquirers should be trying to accomplish two things. One, acquirers should be trying to establish that they are the most committed bidder. So the more due diligence you do, the more established you're going to make yourself as the most committed bidder. And second, you're trying to figure out as much as possible about the potential target. How much can you learn about your target's business, their loans, their deposits, whether it's a trust business or it's commercial real estate or whether it's residential mortgages. You've got to really drill down on those things to truly understand whether or not the target is going to be a good fit with your business as a bank. Risks identified in due diligence are typically addressed through something called the disclosure schedules to the purchase agreement. And what those are is every representation and warranty may have an exception to it, and those exceptions are listed in each disclosure schedule. So the buyer may not be protected against the risks that are identified in those disclosure schedules, but at least the buyer will understand those risks. And it also gives the buyer an opportunity to adjust the purchase price that it's willing to pay in light of the risks that are identified in due diligence and also listed on those disclosure schedules. Representations and warranties in a purchase agreement protect a bank through the indemnification provisions of the agreement. So the indemnification provision will say that to the extent there are inaccuracies in the representations and warranties section, any losses that a buyer suffers because of those inaccuracies will be covered by the seller. And typically that liability lasts for anywhere from 6 months to 24 months following the date of the closing of the transaction. The limits on those liability to the seller can vary, and it depends on the size of the transaction, but it could be $300,000 all the way up to $4 or $5 million. But again, that just depends on the size of the transaction. Any bank going into a merger and acquisition process and going into the bidding process should understand that not every time you go in is going to be successful. You may not always be the winning bidder, or the seller may decide at some point in the process that it doesn't want to sell for whatever reason. So any bank in this process should not be discouraged, and just understand that losing some bids is part of the process, and that the more opportunities you take and the more bids you make and the more letters of intent you negotiate, the more likely you are eventually to end up with a successful transaction.